Welcome to Total Design Live. It's a podcast where real tabletop game designers, with a surprise set of design constraints, design a game right before your very ears. It's game design without a net, and it starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of Total Design Live. I'm David Abelson.
And I'm Rosco Schock. Thanks for joining us. This episode, we're welcoming game designer Jason Slingerland. Hey, Jason, welcome to the show.
Hello. It's good to be. It's really hard to start a podcast recording. I almost started talking before you two did. So
you started saying it's a documentary podcast.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Building almost immediately. Like I was literally watching the countdown to recording.
Muscle memory. It's great to have you here.
It's awesome to be here.
Thanks for agreeing to participate in our little seasons challenge. For people who don't know you and don't listen to Building the Game, could you tell us a little bit about your game design background?
Yeah. So about 12 years ago now, back in 2012, which is 12 years ago, if you can math, sometimes I can. My friend Rob Couch and I decided we really like board games. We wanted to design them. So we started trying to design board games. Rob had this cool idea that we could record ourselves and make a documentary podcast out of that to try and give some resources to people of what to do, what not to do, because there weren't a lot of resources back then. Now there's a lot of resources, many of which I think are better than ours. But I'm still doing the podcast, so I've been designing that whole time. I love designing games. I mostly design games for one target audience, which is my wife, because I think she is the perfect player for games, for the type of games that I like to design. Some games out there. I designed Unreal Estate, Water Balloon Washout, Into the Black Forest, No Context, Tir na Nog, and some other stuff. But I've been doing this for a while. I love it. Yeah. Each time I think I'm out, they pull me back in, you know?
It's a lifelong addiction. Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we dive into the episode, I just want to go over some ground rules for you. If you've listened to the podcast at all, you kind of know this already, but you're going to be given two constraints. You'll be asked to design as much of a game as you can in 45 minutes. One of the constraints will be fairly specific, and it's intended to be a starting anchor point, and the other constraint may be fairly vague, and it's really sort of designed to give you a direction to travel in. These constraints could be related to theme or mechanics or components or game category or even experience for the player. Anything not specified is open to your interpretation. And for instance, just because there's a component that's a restriction doesn't mean that has to be the focus of the game. Sometimes it just means it has to either be included or not included. We're mostly interested in your thought process, how you approach the creative thinking of design. We're not looking for a balanced game or for you to sit there and put rows in a spreadsheet. We're really just here to be a sounding board to help you design. So if you need us, use us. But otherwise, we're pretty much going to be quiet. Once we give you the constraints, we're going to walk you through a set of general questions to help get you started, get your train on the tracks and moving, and then the rest will be up to you. Okay? Cool.
Sounds great.
So here's Rosco.
All right. Without further ado, here are your two constraints. So it's kind of winding down now, but this was planned for slightly earlier in the summer for recording. But the theme is Olympics. So one of the constraints is Olympics, and it doesn't have to be summer, even though we just got done with the Summer Olympics. But that is one constraint. The second one is polyhedral dice or nerd dice or D&D dice, whatever you want to think about it. And specifically, we're looking for more than one type. So not just like some D6s. We'd like to have a mix of dice, at least 4 different types, D12, D20, whatever it might be. And as David said, one thing to keep in mind is although the component is required and has to have some useful purpose in the game, that doesn't mean that this has to be only a dice game. It can have a board, it can have cards, it can have any other things that you eventually want to add to it. It's just it must include polyhedral dice. So first, to help get you started and get the train kind of moving, we're going to ask you a couple of questions. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you is, what's the first thing that this theme makes you think of?
Breakdancing.
That was a pretty interesting thing.
Here's the thing. I'm so glad this waited, because if you had asked me about the Olympics 3 months ago, I would have had no good ideas. Now I already designed the game. So there's a lot of clips right now of the Australian breakdancer Ray Gun, and so that is all in my head, and so that and that Stone Cold Killer shooting guy from Holland or whatever that just wears glasses and looks like he's a hitman. That also plays board games on the side. Yeah. So that literally, those are the things that popped up in my head because I know very little about the Olympics. So I'm pretty excited to dig into that. I really am. I have some ideas. I got a Diet
cool.
Dr. Pepper here. I'm feeling spicy.
So let me ask you this. Does this theme suggest any specific game category or mechanics?
Well, I definitely would say polyhedral dice, more than 4 types, 4 or more types. The thing that popped into my head immediately, I think there's a lot of different things, there's some more specific, like sporty type stuff. But what the type of game that pops into my head immediately is something closer to the party line of games, maybe like a Party Plus, where, like a fast paced game where you are, kind of silly, right? So I guess I'd say mass market with a party bend to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was going to be the last question. Does this theme of the Olympics kind of push you towards a specific weight? And it sounds like it's pushing you a little bit to a lighter, kind of more approachable game design.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Awesome. So now I'm going to kick it over to David, and he's going to run you through
I have some other questions about the components,
awesome.
Right? So, I mean, if you think about games that have polyhedral dice in them, are there any that come to mind that use multiple polyhedral dice other than your standard, like Dungeons and Dragons?
That is a good question. I mean, 6-sided dice, lots, right? I'm trying to think of some games off the top of my head that use multiple. I'm trying to remember if the game Dragonwood or something like that, or Dragon. So it's a game my family really likes. I just can't remember the exact name of it now. This will be a thing whenever you ask me about games. I won't remember names, but no, I'm sure I'm going to feel stupid if you list some, but I'm trying to think off the top of my head of games that require polyhedral dice.
I will not list that
not
many
D&D.
Because in my experience, the only ones I've played have been like I've played games where like the whole game is all 4-sided dice, or there's 12-sided dice, or 6-sided dice, but never multiple.
Yeah.
And I think
too.
What we've said on a couple of previous episodes in the podcast, we talked about the Gen Cant design contest one year was design a roll and write game using a set of polyomino dice, and Rosco and I and a bunch of other people we know had done some designs for that, so we played those. But I would say that there's a lot of exploration left in this space.
I agree.
Yeah, the one that we mentioned on other ones, which ties into what Dave was saying, is so Clarence Simpson, he had a submission to that, and so his game Merchants of Magic actually is based on his Gen Cant submission. So that one uses different size dice, and then depending on which die you use and what numbers you roll, you get different benefits in the different areas. But there's not a ton. Mostly when people see D&D dice, they do D&D things. So
that's the next question I want to ask before we sort of get you started is, can you think of ways to use the dice other than your standard roll for, skill check kind of deal? Like they do in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. I mean, there's tossing dice, not caring about the roll, but caring about doing something dexterity wise with it, or caring about the roll, but also, I think of things like True Dungeon. I'm sure some people are familiar with True Dungeon. It's like a live event you can do. They didn't use dice for this, but they used these like hockey puck looking things that were 20-sided dice essentially. And I don't remember exactly how it worked, but you would slide them like a puck down, like almost like a shuffleboard puck, but you'd slide it with your hands on like a tabletop thing, and depending on if it hit and then where it pointed told you if it hit and how much damage it did. So like your hit was your dexterity, but how much damage it did was kind of the orientation of it, which I thought was really, really clever. And then I did that, and then we crossed a bridge, and I rolled an actual die and immediately died in the second room, and that was $40 I was never going to get back. So
what you're saying is this is better than that.
Yeah, there was that. For sure, yeah. But I think, I like the idea of like destruction with dice, where if you were building something, like say you were building a wall and you're rolling dice at it trying to knock it over, it's hard for my brain to not have the result of the dice mean something, because you're rolling the dice, right? So like it feels like it has to matter in some way, Well, I mean, I think when I think about, and Rosco, this, the classic game of polyhedral dice used in weird ways is, of course, Dodge Dice from the Building the Game Iron Design Challenge, in which you took a stuffed D4, that was about, I don't know, the size of my head, and then chucked it at the person. And if you hit them with it, the damage you did was the roll. So yeah, that's probably the most classic thing that is world renowned that no one's heard of. We did that because I couldn't not use the roll, right?
Did this happen at the building the game?
So I think to me,
did I miss out on?
No, this Gen Con. Every year at Gen Con for 5 or 6 years, we did this thing called the Iron Design Challenge, where 2 designers met in a cage match, and only one of them left a winner. The other one left a loser.
That is awesome.
But yeah. So,
all right. Well, I think you have enough to go on. You said you were fired up and had some ideas, and I feel like maybe you're going to stick with breakdancing, or maybe you're not.
No, that's breakdancing is not the theme. That's just what it made me think of. Theme is different. It's not even about the Olympics. No, I'm kidding. It is, because you said
it could be about the Olympics, but not about the Olympics.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 45 minutes to go, and I'm going to say start. Are you ready for that? Go.
Yes.
Your 45 minutes begins now.
All right. I love it. Okay. All right. So the idea that popped in my head was my understanding of the Olympics. I mean, I get what the Olympics are about, right? But like my relevant understanding of the Olympics of late are just these little snapshots of this ray gun person breakdancing, this killer guy shooting, or just a lot of random other shots like that I've seen in memes or something like that of people doing Olympic events. And so my first thought was, I'm assuming it's okay to talk through some ideas I have that I've already got rid of. So like my first thought was, like, because everybody's like, oh, this breakdancing shouldn't have been in the Olympics, right? But I'm not a curmudgeon. So I was like, what are other things that maybe shouldn't be in the Olympics? And, like thinking about that was my first, like, I'll just do that. I'll have events that shouldn't be in the Olympics and think of a bunch of weird stuff. And I was like, well, that's a lot to think about, and I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't want to spend all my time coming up with a bunch of ideas for that, right? And plus, I feel like that joke gets old after a little while, right? Like, you play the game once, it's funny because there's couch potatoing in the Olympics, but then it's just not as funny anymore. Right? The joke loses kind of its thing. So I think that what I'm settling on now is, what if you're doing the normal Olympics, but instead of swimmers competing against swimmers or breakdancers against breakdancers, what if it's a random draw and we draw whatever number of players are, X number of players are doing a different event, but scoring against each other to try to win. And you may be like, well, how would a swimmer score against a breakdancer or a shooter? I have no idea. That's a great question, but I like the way that feels. I like the idea of the crazy matchups of people going head to head. So that is where I think that's where I'm starting. So you've got the goals have got to be asymmetrical, I think, to fit with the theme. And then dice getting worked in. Obviously, if you're just rolling to try and like accomplish this, probably not super fun and engaging after the first little bit of doing that. But let me think here. I think you'd have cards that you would draw a card that would say the event you're competing in. So there's an interesting thought. Would it be cooler if you drew the event you were competing in and then also drew a card that said who you were? Or, for instance, am I Katie Ledecky breakdancing instead of swimming? Or, am I her swimming against somebody else who's boxing? Because with the asymmetrical goals, right, if you draw a card and on it, it has what you have to do to accomplish the goal to win. And then, the other player would have, okay. What if the cards, yeah. What if the card that gets drawn is like a bigger card than just, like say they're big tarot size cards or something like that, right? So you can still have there's enough, you can still have a deck of them, but you draw that card and then it has all the events that are going to be active that round, right? Oh, no. Yeah, it's just got all the events. So let's say there's 15 events in the game. We'll say 10. That's a little more manageable. So there's 10 different events. So when I flip over a card, it's going to have all 10 events listed, kind of like a card you'd see like a Trivial Pursuit or something, where it's got the different categories, except for bigger. So it's like that. And then they have different requirements for each one to achieve the goal. What determines in that, so each round you'd have a way that you would be, okay. I'm probably overcomplicating this, but I'm just going to go with it for now. So now you have 3 decks of cards, okay? probably too many. You've got a small deck that is the 20 different people you could beat. I mean, people as competitors, right? It's not like it's like Katie Ledecky or probably literally that's the only person that I can name. Oh, Simone Biles. There's another one. That's it though. That's the end. That's the end of my list. Stone Cold Killer guy and Ray Gunn. I don't know. I'm feeling that's not her real name.
Rachel Gunn.
So anyway, it's Rachel Gunn. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I love it. What a great name to have. Okay, don't get sidetracked. All right. So you have 3 decks of cards. You've got the one with the competitors, right? And that is probably always the same. They're like role selection cards. Maybe you're given 2 of those or something and you get to pick. That doesn't matter for now. We'll come back to those. So then you've got the event cards. And that's going to say this round, this is the difficulty of each thing you have to do. Maybe it's the dice you have to roll, could be, or the combination of dice you have to roll. Oh, I kind of like that. We'll come back to that. Maybe the third one is a location card. And the location, I think for the location to make it fair would have to be something that could have more things maybe than just like what I'm thinking is like if the location is a pool and you have the swimmer, that's a good round for you, right? But if the location is, a boxing ring and you're the swimmer, that's probably not so great for you. Let's think about that. I'm not sure what to do.
The question I have is you've got like say a swimmer and a boxer and they're going up against each other. Are they ever going to be in a pool? Mm-hmm. Or are they always going to be in a place where neither one of them is familiar?
That's what I was leaning towards, but I was having trouble kind of quantifying that is, so like, what if the location was, say, a beach, right? So you've got water, but you've got sand, right? And you've maybe, I guess what I'm saying is, what if the location is multiple terrains, like
Street Fighter.
Right? It could be like Street Fighter. I wasn't thinking about it being a fighting game.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take you down that road. It's just that Street Fighter, they keep changing locations.
No. I was thinking a location that had multiple benefits or negatives to it. Honestly, that probably is just overcomplicating it.
Have you seen The Floor?
So
the game show, The Floor?
Is that like, is that the one where like the floor falls out or something? Or no, did I just make that up?
In this game show, The Floor, there's all these people standing on this big floor, and they each have an area of specialty, right? A trivia area of specialty. And so their goal is to try and take over the floor, competing against each other to answer questions in rapid fire succession. Sometimes you get to answer questions about the topic that you understand, right? That you're good at. Sometimes you have to answer questions about the topic that your opponent is good at. It depends on who initiated the challenge. If you win, you're no longer the expert in the thing you were expert at. You take over the other person's expertise.
Oh, no, that's good. That's really good. So like if I'm the swimmer, but in the shooting competition, I manage to win, then I become the shooter. The swim. Oh, so I retain my old and keep the new. I was asking how that game show works. I thought that it was I lose the title I have and take the new title on.
Because in the game show, each set of questions can only be used once. So once you've competed on the one set of questions you and your opponent have, you're only left with in the game show.
That makes more sense. Okay. I get you. Okay. It almost would be fun if what if the story kind of the game was, what if you were all the gold medal champions, right? It's like gold medal rally, right? So you all are the gold medal champions, like to what you're saying. And so you're trying to steal each other's gold medals by beating you at your own game. Like that sort of thing.
I just figured that was the direction you were heading.
I wish I was, but it wasn't. So now thank you for that prompt, because that I think is useful. If the let me think here. So you're trying to take each other's gold medals. You've got these asymmetrical goals. The dice are throwing me off a bit now, because my first thought was that you would roll, different dice each time. So, but like if I'm rolling a D20 and you're rolling a D4, that's not great. That said, what if you had all the dice, right? So you have all the, because who cares? Like we're not, we don't have to produce this game. So what if you actually had the whole set of D&D polyhedral dice? So you've got a D20, a D12, a D10, a D8, a D6, and a D4. So that you've got 6 dice. I had to count that on my hands. It's late here. So what if you have those dice, and based on who you are, what your skill is. So if I'm a swimmer, then anything swimming adjacent, I'm going to get to roll. I'm going to, for swimming type of stuff, I'm going to get to roll the 20-sider. And then it just goes downhill from there as to like what you are least qualified at. I'm not exactly sure how you would measure that. Like, I don't really want the people to have like stat cards or something, right? Because that just feels overly complicated. I think what I'm going for here is something that is fun and snappy. There's an event, it comes up, we choose what dice to roll, we roll, and then from there we determine what we have.
So do we only roll once in each one of those circumstances, depending on are you thinking that maybe it depends on the event?
So here's what I'm thinking right now. I said there are, say, 20 competitors, and they say there's 20 competitors, right? And you've got a subsection of those, for instance, say, right? What if you could have your main Olympian for the event you would put in, and then your like support Olympian who would be helping them, right? And if you lose, okay, I like this. So let's do this. Let's say that for now, it's going to be boring dice rolling. We'll see if we pivot from there or not, but for now it's going to be boring dice rolling. So the event comes up. There is a goal to the event, like a difficulty you're trying to meet for the event. For lack of that'll just be a placeholder for now, we'll say. So I'm going to put if it's a swimming event, I'm going to put my swimming Olympian if I have them. But I think this is what's more fun is that Rob actually designed a game a really long time ago. Rob Couch, my pal, that he never did anything with. It was called I don't remember what it was, but he had this really neat card system where you had a hand of cards and then you would play two of them, and then they would get every time you played a card, it would get pushed off, and they made the kind of this circle back around, so that essentially when I played a card, it was going to be gone for a while out of the rotation, right? So I've got a hand of say 3 cards, right? And maybe let's say I have 10 cards in total. Maybe we all have one of every competitor. We've got that, right? So I'm going to choose to play out of the 3 cards in my hand. I'm going to play 2 of those cards. It's possible that neither one of them are an exact match for the event that we are competing in. Because now I feel like the event that pops up is an actual event, or maybe they're silly hybrid events that kind of mix and match a couple skills. So I'm going to choose to play both these cards. I'm going to play my Olympian and my supporting Olympian, right? And my Olympian is going to roll their die, and you're going to take the actual cash value of that dice, right? The real roll that you get, right? The second die you roll, which could be better, right? The Olympian I choose, my main Olympian, maybe is rolling a D10 against this because this is not their best thing, but it's not their worst thing, right? And then the side Olympian is actually rolling a D20, say, right? Because they don't fit the category as well, right? So whoever fits the category better has to do it. When they roll the dice, you only get to take half that result. You add those together. And I think if you lose, then you lose your main Olympian, right? And they're out. They're out. You set them off to the side. And then your supporting the supporting Olympian, moves along. And then you draw your next 2 cards again. Now you've got 3 cards again in your hand. We're going to rinse and repeat that. It's kind of basic. And I think there's more that could be done with it. But that's a start.
So I just wanted to jump in briefly, and it sounds like you don't watch a whole lot of the Olympics, and I think the one thing that's
0%
in mind,
other than memes,
is that there's kind of 2 kinds of Olympic events, and it doesn't matter whether it's winter or summer. There's one where it's fastest, whatever the most quickest is, right? Running, swimming, and things like that. And then there's also a whole bunch of other ones which are judged. They're much more artistic, and they're about doing good. Right or wrong. And so one thing that we've talked about in previous episodes is that D20 has higher numbers, but it also has higher variance, right? And there's a spectrum of that. And so the way the judging ones generally work, because the skills are so hard, is they have these things which basically are called mandatory deductions. And so you get to pick how difficult something is, which is how hard the dive or the flip or whatever it is.
But if you screw it up,
that's a multiplier on your score. However, then there's deductions if you like don't land on 2 feet, or if you splashed more, or if you whatever the things are. I don't know all the specific ones. And so the one thing is, when you have dice, we generally get caught in the mindset of like more is always better, right? And so just kind of teasing in your brain a little bit that sometimes, like, for these, if you're doing events that are more judged, it's usually errors, and then more is definitely not better. And so there's some juxtaposition and some things you could play around with that. So I just wanted to kind of like tease that into your brain a little bit, since maybe Olympics isn't as much in the home
and then
stretch.
Since we're on a break, I just thought I would mention too. We're not really on a break. You're still on the clock. I thought I would mention too that in the Olympics there is definitely a distinction between events that are very individual in nature and events that are team.
Right.
Like rugby, one-on-one rugby would be very hard.
Sorry, I know enough about rugby, as in I know there's a team and you punch people. I think you punch people from what I've seen. That would be harder. That would be boxing, basically, then
with a ball
on a field, which seems weird. Yeah, you just throw it at each other real hard. Okay. So let's think about that then. We've got team. I'm gonna make these notes here. You've got a team event, individual. So that's 2 kind of categories. But then you've also got, Rosco, what's a good word for, you've got, like you said, fastest, but like David was saying, like in a team game, right? It's about like scoring higher. It's like there's versus and then there's individual, right? So there's like versus and then there's you, even though it's all, is that making sense? You're all competing together or you're not. And I get that that's like, because there's team, there's individual, but in an individual match, you might be competing against one another, right? For instance, in a swim race or a fencing match. I'm trying to think of how to classify that.
Okay, well, so swimming and ping pong, for instance, are different, right? Even though there's one-on-one, 1v1 ping pong, it's still I'm earning a score, right. You're earning a score, highest score, first person to achieve X score wins.
So it's still a race almost.
But swimming is definitely a race, right? Because we all have the same distance to travel. It's just about who gets there first. Beach volleyball, those events that have score, I think that's your sort of category of that type, versus what Rosco said is the judged one, where there's a certain maximum value you're attempting to achieve.
Judged. No, that's it. That's it. Judged, and we'll call it victory and judged. So basically victory is, and there are better terms for this, I'm sure, but judged is actually super good because it's the Olympics. But victory is beating the other person versus, right? Judged is, actually it could just be versus and judged. Let's do that. The kids say verse nowadays. Just so you guys know, if you weren't aware of that,
bros.
They say verse. Do they still say that? I thought my kids always say
Super
bruh.
Mario,
but
bros.
Instead of brothers, yeah, we shorten stuff. It's actually super efficient. I got respect for it. So you've got your versus events, which are kind of like Then you've got your judged events. So the way I see it here is you actually have 4 things. You've got individual, team, versus judged. So I think every event that comes up is gonna have 2 of those on there. It's either going to be team for individual, it's either going to be versus or judged. And I think it might be better to just assign dice specifically to each competitor based on what theirs is. And this is obviously nitty gritty that we probably won't add completely while we're doing this, right? But for instance, I think that if it's a versus thing, then that's where I think that the bigger dice, right? You've got the variance of you've got, is my score bigger? Am I faster? So bigger dice. So we'll call that D20, D12. Yeah, actually that works. D20, D12, D10, right? And then the judged people will have D8, D6, and D4. That splits it up really nicely. So Are y'all following me? Is that making sense so far where I'm at? You can just nod if you want. It's good podcasting, trust me. They nodded. They nodded and gave me a huge thumbs up. They really dig this. Okay, so you've got
I'm
the
concerned about which set you're giving the D100 to. Okay.
Neither, actually. Neither. Because the D100 is essentially a golf ball, Dave. So just rolls across the table and does not stop. Just keeps going. So, all right. So I think you've got, so the bigger dice are for people who are competing. That would be pretty much any team sport, right? Individual could be, can you guys think of a team sport where you're judged?
Synchronized swimming.
Maybe synchronized swimming or something like that. Is that a thing?
Synchronized swimming.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are both, right? So great. So, basically when the card comes up, it tells you what the event is. So it's going to have 3 pieces of information on it. What's the event, right? Is it team or individual? And is it versus or is it judged? And so I think with those 3 pieces of information, you actually, I really like that. So what we have then is we've got the Olympians that are, each competitor would have, they would have their specific event, right? Or, a range of events. If it was swimming, they would have the swimming events, that sort of thing, right? So they've got a range of events that are their specific event. And I think they get a bonus if they get to play in that specific event. And then team will tell you if it's just that one person that's going to do, you're going to have to choose one player. Or if you're going to take 2 of the cards you have and put those out there instead of just the one. So essentially with that information, then the player, the Olympians that you have, if you've got 3 in your hand, you'll always have a choice, right? Of who you want to put out there. So let's say I have, these 3 different people, a fighting event comes up or something like that. Right now, I know that it is it's a team sport. So team sport event comes up. I have one person that's on a team, and I have 2 people that aren't. So I'm going to pick one person that's on a team, obviously, because if they do team sports, they're going to get a bonus, right? And then I'm going to pick the best other one, and we're going to use that to see if we can win. So I think that with the versus stuff, you want to roll higher plus your modifiers, right? If you have any. If it's judged, you want to hit a specific range of numbers, which I really like that suggestion, Rosco. So, and then maybe your modifier, if it is your event, is a plus or minus, right? So I'm hoping I can get the perfect score on that. And what's funny is now if I have 2 people rolling D20s and one person rolling a D4, and I have to hit a specific number, those D20s suck for that. Right. But the D4 or something like that allows you to get within that kind of like precision range. So I think I like that. I think that would be really easy to teach, really easy to play. And then I don't think that you should lose your character. The more I think about that, I don't like that. I think that maybe you should lose or gain a medal. I kind of like gaining a medal. Like maybe you get a gold medal if you win within the range. You get a silver if you win, and you get a bronze if you lose. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm saying it or not.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Hey, I just wanted to jump in real quick and say we're a little bit past halfway. So
I figured we were.
Give you a time check. So
Okay. How am I doing so far? Is this like, yeah, we're okay? All right. The facts we have so far, we know how the cards come out, how the cards work. We're down back to 2 decks of cards, 8 billion dice. Not really, but like if this is, so let's talk a bit more about the competitors then and how that would work. I think that everyone would get a deck of all of the competitors. So let's say there's 20 competitors total. Maybe it's just 10. Let's call it 20 for giggles right now. Each person gets that deck of 20 cards. Because this game is really well funded, they're all going to be different cool art of different people and stuff, for sure. But yeah, the characters essentially would be all the same. It's, you would get bonuses in certain things. And I think that bonus again for like the versus stuff would be a plus modifier, and then for the judge stuff would be a kind of like a fudging ability to move it around.
And are you sort of saying that each one of those cards will have just a thing that they're good at, and so they get that one bump, or will they have a scale of bumps?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So I think the way it would work is there would probably be multiple water events, for instance. You kind of break it down by that. There's water events, maybe there's gymnastic events, maybe there's race events, right? Or that sort of thing. And so they have kind of like, we'll say maybe you would narrow it down to 3, right? So each, or even maybe just, well, you've got, I can think it depends. If you've got 20 cards, 2 to 3 each to like, if I've got 2 things I'm really good at. Anything beyond that, I get 0 modifiers. Only because I don't want to make it too complex. I mean, you absolutely could have a scale, right? Where it's like, if my first modifier, is if it's the exact thing, it's a plus X. Otherwise, it's a plus Y. Otherwise, it's a plus Z. And you just kind of do that. But I think I'd rather it was just one, it's a good or it's not. Maybe I don't think I want to be negative because that's where the dice come in. Yeah, I don't think I want to have a negative because, if it's a race and I'm rolling a D4, that's the negative. Right? Like that's the negative right there because it's not good. That's why I think it's important. You always have 3 cards in your hand. You'll never have to play more than 2 of them. And that second person's just a backup. They could absolutely screw it up for you. But so yeah, I think gold medal is you hit a specific like target or level. So obviously the specific target, on the precision is like Price is Right. Like, did I get it right on the button or within a certain amount? Then there's, did I get it in the certain range or did I completely biff that, right? Like, was I closest? Was I perfect? Was I closest? Was I out of it? Is your gold, silver, bronze. And then for the other, it would be like, did I get at least a 12? If I got a 12 or better, then I get a gold if I won. And then, down from there. If I didn't, but I still have the highest, I get a silver. If I lose, I get the bronze. Those are going to be these sweet little wooden medals. They're going to also have like the Olympics stuff on them. They're all going to be branded by the Olympics. It's going to be amazing. So you would collect those at the end of the games. It's real easy to have them be worth like 3, 2, 1 for your points to add them up to see what you get. So yeah, the competitor cards, just all the competitor cards say is your specific thing you're good at, the die you use, and that's probably it. I mean, I love things like variable player powers, but I feel like that's not the right fit here because it would just be too much to have in one thing. Let's talk a little bit more about how you get cards in your hand and how you play them. So what I was thinking was, I mean, it could be as simple as you get every card once. Like we build the number of rounds out so that if there's 20 rounds and you never have to play more than 10 rounds, you never have to play more than 2 cards, you would absolutely have enough cards to do that. Set number rounds might be an easy way to do it. Yeah, I think we'll just say set number rounds. It'll be 10 rounds. The rounds would play very quickly. So this is probably a game that would play really fast, maybe too fast. I definitely think this is a filler little party thing where you're just rolling dice and having fun. Something like real time could be added to this, but I just don't like real time because I'm bad at it. And I just feel like it overcomplicates it, just having to be so quick at the rolling. Plus, I also think for some of the stuff, it just feels weird. Like, like I'm rolling the fastest to get the right number for the floor exercise. Like that doesn't make sense. That feels weird. For a race, that feels like it makes sense. Okay, so we got that.
Does it make sense to maybe... I'm just spitballing on the floor exercise because you mentioned it. A floor exercise has X number of components, for instance, that the judges are looking for you to do this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing, and then that thing.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So the idea that instead of cards having a single event, I mean, they would have a single event, but instead of it being just a roll the highest, I like that. It could be more like... there's this game called Dice Cards that I'm really into, where you score each one differently. In the beginning of the game, you get 6 cards or something, and you roll dice and try to score different things on those over the course of the rounds. But it could be neat in real time, almost like Roll For It, where you're trying to like complete the card first. Again, no speed rolling. But you could it could be, okay, we're doing this part. This is your target. Roll the dice. Add your modifiers, whatever, so that actually could be cool. especially like in a team game where it could be like number of rounds, right? Like, so it's like, okay, this is volleyball. So you're going to each roll back and forth 4 times, or well, it should be an odd number, 5 times. And then the winner of that, if you win, and then it really becomes who won the most rounds. Did you win 4 out of 5 rounds? If you did, gold medal. 3 is, that sort of thing. I like that. I actually like that a lot. That's a really good suggestion. And it would mean that every card would be unique that you flipped up. And I like that a lot. Something like a steeplechase or something. I don't know what that is, but I know there's components to it. So like you would, have to try to win each section first, or, but there could also be some, that's the way to do it. That's great, man. That is the way to do it, to make each card unique in a fun way, to where you are competing in different ways to win the cards. I love that. And, the floor exercise is a really good example too, where you get X number of rolls and you're trying to get the most precise, thing in that time, or, the aggregate kind of like of the preciseness. Yeah. In fact, one like that, you could actually have like little scorecards on it, right? And it's like, if you get this, you get a 10. If you get this, you get a whatever. And then in the end, you total those, and that's who wins that. I dig that a lot. Yeah, that is absolutely the way to go with this. I'm going to go that way. I'm not sure what else to add after that, because that feels pretty good. I will say, so for how you get cards, I think you're dealt 3 cards. Anytime you play a card, you just draw back to 3. So as team games come up, people use 2 cards, they draw 2 cards. They only use 1, they just draw 1. I think it's that simple for that. And then you just never get the card back. Once you use it, you don't ever get it back. And then the game's over after 10 rounds.
And so even team competing,
that's where I'm at.
Are still only 2 people, 2 cards rather.
Yeah, I like that better than 3, just because you still have some agency in what you choose then. Specifically, I think of synchronized swimming, right? Like synchronized swimming, if I have 1 judge person and then 2 racing people, right, who are like versus people, that is gonna be really bad, because like potentially I could get lucky and it's funny, right? Like, but I want it to be funny and the player still has choice. Right. So if I get stuck with having 2 people with 20-sided dice and I really prefer a D4 and my third person has a D4, I get the D4 and I got to pick one of the 20s, but I'm less screwed than if I was forced to pick 2 of the 20s and the D4. And there could be 3 20s at some point. Maybe there's a rule around mucking cards or something to be able to get something different.
Those poor athletes that you just tossed aside. Yeah,
well, Olympics is rough, man. It's just they can go back to Olympic Village or whatever it's called. So that's where I'm not sure what else to add to that.
Let me just circle back to one thing you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, let's do it.
I lost a little bit of the thread a little bit. Is location still a factor, or did that kind of get dropped by the wayside?
No, that got dropped because it occurred to me that you could just have it be a specific event, and then you've got your competitors that are good at 3 events, say, or 2 events, and that's where they get their bonuses, so the location doesn't matter. And then, in addition to that, adding in what Dave suggested of, every card is unique that you're trying to compete against, I think location just adds a modifier at that point that's completely unhelpful. So yeah, for that reason, I'm out, as they would say on Shark Tank, when it comes to location. So yeah, I would drop location for sure. And if, I was going to say if it's too wild, you could drop the D20, but no, I like having that awful die that is either really good or really bad. So
right, that is great. So it sounds like done. So we what I want to do is just quickly ask you if you could sum up the game you just designed with your 1-minute elevator pitch.
Sure. The top Olympians have been chosen for a special version of the Olympics where they risk gold medals, trying to earn gold medals. We'll say they made a pot of all the medals, right? That's the medals in the game. They are now going to try to redistribute them by proving that they're not the best at their own thing, that they are the best Olympic team, even if they have to do the wrong events. In the game, you're going to do the wrong events, sometimes the right events. It's luck of the draw. You're going to be competing in unique events. Never the same event twice, never with the same people twice, trying to bring home as many gold, silver, and bronze medals as possible.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to ask you some questions. Great job. I think it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me. Thanks. I don't know if it was a lot of fun for our audience, but we'll just ask them later.
I enjoyed it, so I don't really care about the audience. I'm glad that I had fun doing it.
So that's the answer to my first question. Did you have fun?
Yeah. I had a great time. This was, I'll be honest, when you said Olympics, my first thought was, well, crap, like this is going to be hard. But then once that thread kind of popped for me, then I was really excited about it.
So so the question I wanted to ask Ness is, was this easier or harder than you thought it was going to be? Like before we told you it was going to be the Olympics?
Yeah, but so I think that the expectations I was coming in with, it was both easier and harder in different places. You know, the initial pitch of like, what's the silly thing you're going to do in this game? That felt very easy. Like that was in my head in seconds, you know, like I was like, and this is what we used to do on BTG, right? Like that's the depth of the pitch that I needed. And so that was real lightning fast. Being like, well, it's going to be asymmetrical, different competitors. Like that was all I got it. And then the nitty gritty was harder than I expected it to be with how quickly that all started off. Does that make sense?
But you trudged through it and you had a couple of moments where I think you sort of, hit an obstacle as you were climbing up the hill, but you overcame it and kept going.
Yes, y'all did help a lot, and I appreciate that. Your suggestions, I mean, your last suggestion there, Dave, without that, I felt like it was pretty basic, and that gives a lot of fun design space.
But I want to ask, how close to your normal process was this?
You know, if I'm co-designing something with somebody and we decide to just kind of spitball an idea, like I say, hey, I've got X idea for a theme and like kind of a general thing, this feels a lot like that process of like, there's obviously more back and forth than, like you two just chiming in sometimes, but it felt a lot like that. You know, my first portion of design is very brainstormy. And then after that, I kind of move into spreadsheet mode where I would, if I was designing this game, my next step would immediately be the events. I would figure out what the events were and how they would work. And I would make a spreadsheet of all that. And then I would design competitors based on that. And it would be perfectly balanced. In the spreadsheet, you guys would not believe how balanced it would be. And then I would play it and wouldn't it be fun? And then I'd start to unbalance it to make it more fun. So that's kind of the next half of the process I would do.
That's under the understanding that this is the first half of the process.
I don't know, I'd say half.
Do you think you will continue with this design?
I'm intrigued by this design. There are some really positive things this design has going for it that makes me interested in continuing in it. The components, I mean, so for designers out there, right? Like people will say, don't worry about the components when you design. Just design for your heart. Measure components with your heart. But when you've been doing this for 12 years, right? Like, and I'm not like, oh, I'm this weathered veteran. It's just like, there comes a point when I know that I'm probably pursuing something that is not worthwhile. As I was saying that, I'm ready to be like, absolutely not. I think you only need 2 sets of dice because you just have 2 players going at the same time, which is something we did not talk about. If this is more than a 2-player game, how do you decide who does each thing? Is it everyone at once? Is it just, 2 people versus each other each time? And that kind of rotates. I don't know the answer to that. So the dice to me are the biggest hurdle to jump over because you want to throw a bunch of D6s in a game. That's not bad. You want to throw all these polyhedral dice in a game and that is suddenly, publishers are like, what? The idea though is interesting enough to me that I really like the idea of the interplay of the cards. So yeah, I mean, it's something I think that I would continue to mess around with.
Okay, great. Rosco?
Well, thanks for being on. So Jason, is there any projects or things going on right now that you'd like to tell us about?
I'm so glad you asked. I'd love to tell you about a project I have going on, which this is funny. Full disclosure, we've been trying to schedule this for a couple months now, and things have just been crazy on my end that have nothing to do with game design. But now that I realized as we're recording, you said, this is going to come out this Sunday. I'm like, hey, I have a Kickstarter going right now. That's really awesome. So Tir na Nog is a really fun game I designed with Isaac Shalev that is from Grand Gamers Guild. It went on GameFound quite a while back. It did okay, and then went to Gen Con, went to Origins, and did really, really well and got some really nice reviews. People said some really kind things about it, and it kind of blew up, and it sold out. So now it's back on Kickstarter for a reprint with some sweet expansion stuff that we worked on. Isaac did a lot of that. I get to help out with it a bit. There's like an escape room game that's 18 cards. It was designed by Ken Franklin. And it's all part of that Kickstarter. So that is running until I think September 6th. So I'm pretty jazzed about that. It's going well so far, and I'm just really excited to see it getting back out there, because it's awesome when it sells out, but it's also a bummer because you want more people that want the game to get the game, right? And you can, of course, listen to Building the Game Podcast if you want to. You can find that at buildingthegamepodcast.com, or it's on all your podcasting lovely places. And we do the Discord meetup every week in our Discord. So you can find that on the website too. Sorry, I just went to plug mode.
Oh, no, no worries. Yeah, so you answered the second question, which was how can people connect?
Yeah, definitely the Discord.
Join the Building the Game Discord. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of really nice people there that are all really supportive. And as Jason was briefly mentioning, there's a weekly kind of accountability, like buddy check kind of thing, where people just talk about what they worked on and what they hope to, and could they use help. Super low key and
super low pressure too.
Helpful.
It's the friendliest accountability check you will ever have. People just want to make sure you're doing all right and chat with you and have fun.
Yeah, I'm
highly
trying to
recommend
figure out right now why I'm not a member of the Discord.
As we ate dinner together, I'm pretty sure I told you that, at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Let's say goodbye to our listeners. Hey, listeners, if you want to join in the discussion about this episode this season, or if you'd like to participate in a future season, reach out to us online at Total Design Live, or you can get us on Twitter or Blue Sky at Total Design Live. That's it for this episode, but we hope you'll join us again for more game design without a net. Until next time, I'm David.
And I'm Rosco. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Total Design Live. Be sure to check out how other designers did this season with the same surprise design constraints. We hope this podcast will help inspire you in your own board game design journey and give you a peek behind the curtain about how other designers' creative process works. Please like and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you'll come back and join us again for future episodes.